So, we are here today taping a segment of Zooming In with my friend Veronique de Rugy. We've known each other for a very long time, but somehow, Vero, you and I haven't been on a podcast together, right?
Yeah, no,
You have written for the Unpopulist, but
yes.
it's great to have you. So, you are an economist. Our readers should know you work with the Mercator Center. You and I were colleagues for a while. And let me start at the outside by asking you, one question that I get asked, a lot of times, especially by our center left friends, which is, there were many right wingers who supported Trump the second time because they thought, compared to any establishment alternative, he was going to be anti-war. And this was always mind-boggling to most people who had watched him in his first term, because he was not lacking in any kind of belligerence. And he had written a piece about how he had vastly expanded America's military footprint when it came to drone warfare, and he didn't really cut back any bases or anything. You're not a military expert, but there is an analogy in economics here, and especially for those who advocate free markets like you. Many people voted for Trump because they thought he would be less meddlesome in markets than the alternative, in this case, Kamala Harris. But how are they feeling in the second year of Trump's first term?
Well, I don't know how they're feeling, but I can tell you how I'm feeling because, um, for sure, I mean, I knew he wasn't going to be what I wanted, but I didn't actually expect he would be as bad as he is. In fairness, like a lot of people who voted for him thinking he would be great on economic issues assumed that he would be the same Trump as in the first term. Obviously, there were a lot of things that were really bad in the first term, even on the economic stuff in particular, like spending. It was bad. I mean, he just doesn't care about this. But I mean, people liked the tax cuts, and they looked much more like the regular kind of Republican type tax cuts. We knew tariff was going to be bad, but they didn't. No one, I think, unless I'm wrong, could have actually foreseen like how just remarkably worse it is turned out to be. The scale, but also the breadth of the stuff he's done on economic issues. Now, if you're asking me for the people who voted for him, I assume that there's enough good that they can actually continue justifying, like just tell themselves, like Kamala would not have done this, and they're right. They're absolutely right about this. So I think, like with every president and every administration, you can just kind of find a thing that conforms to your views and make yourself feel better to tell yourself you never ever ever make any mistakes in your judgment.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, you can tell yourself a story. I agree with that, and you would have to cherry pick a whole lot of facts to make Trump's economics look good. But let's just kind of look at the record over
Mhm.
here, right? His first term, he was no slouch when it came to spending. And what's interesting about Democrats is that they are tax and spend. They come, they tax, and they spend a whole lot of money. He was more tax cut and spend, right? Like he cut taxes and then he raised spending.
In that sense,
Quite
he's very much like a regular Republican, in my opinion.
right. And yeah, and the only time, as you know better than me, the only time you actually get any spending cuts or deficit reduction is when you have a Democrat in the White House and a Republican Congress. The last time we had any kind of a deficit, or I'm sorry, a surplus, a federal surplus, was under Clinton. And well, those days are long gone. But this term, it was very interesting because he came in, with Elon Musk, who was not confirmed by the Senate. He appointed him czar of government cutting through the Doge program. And yet, 1 year after he's been in office, there's been a 4% increase in spending. Forget debts, forget deficits, but just plain spending. It's gone up 4%. And, this weekend he released a budget, which there's a 42% surge in defense spending. And that's outside of the 200 billion that Hexeth is asking for the Iran war as part of supplemental emergency spending. How is this sustainable? How is this not a black mark on him already?
So first is none of this is sustainable, right? But actually, you're too generous. I think with Trump, I think.
Nobody's accused me of that before when it comes to Trump.
Well, I mean, you're too generous when it comes to the spending because what is actually what one of the things that I think we can say about him is like ultimately he while I said, in his cut taxes and increase spending, he looks like other Republicans. At the very least, other Republicans paid lip service to actually small government and to cutting spending. He doesn't care about this. He just doesn't care about. We while a lot of the debt increase during his first term came because of COVID. Like he grew the debt by over $7 trillion, and more than half of this was the COVID increase. Like when the pre-COVID era during the first term, like deficits were about to reach $1 trillion while the economy was growing. There were no emergency. It was just like I remember writing columns about like this is insane. This is literally insane. Where like and part of this was actually there's like entitlement spending that is driving most of the deficit spending. But nonetheless, he was just did not care about it. This was not an issue of the first term, which is crazy precisely because they'd like to brag about how the economy was doing great. And there's no better time to actually do reduction in deficit spending than when the economy is good. That's the time where and especially wages were growing. So that would have been, so he did not care about this. The entire campaign, there was none of this on the menu. And then until all of a sudden, Elon Musk said he was going to cut $2 trillion of the deficit. I, I fell for it a little bit. You know that. Like, I mean, I was like, oh, I was just kind of, was a little piece of me that thought, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great? It turned out it wasn't great at all, but it didn't materialize. It was like it was going to cut 2 trillion, then 1 trillion, and then $150 billion in the worst possible way. This budget is actually talking again about how the budget is going after woke and DEI programs. It's like it's not going to scratch the surface to actually what we need to be doing to be fiscally responsible. And just you mentioned the new program, so it raises defense spending by over $400 billion. I think it's $445 billion, and they're cutting non-defense discretionary spending by $73 billion. It's not even barely trying to offset any of the defense ramp up. I assume there'll be no much offsetting of the $200 billion supplemental. And by the way, if it goes through reconciliation, it's likely going to be much bigger. And you know, and yeah, because for reconciliation, right, it means you need to, either way, you need to get it through Congress. So it means there's going to be some bargaining in there. And the final point is like one big beautiful bill had some really good features, but it was not. Well, I will give credit to some Republicans that demanded some level of offsetting. It was barely. It was almost nothing. So you're giving too much credit to the president. The president does not care about spending at all.
Well, let me redeem myself over here, which is that, you said a part of you kind of was happy when Elon Musk came along
Hopeful,
with his
hopeful.
hopeful, or yeah, like you allowed yourself to be slightly hopeful when Elon Musk came along with his, what was
I
his
know you
electric.
weren't, but you're always so much wiser than I am.
No, 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 actually I am not, but I credit him for the opposite. Like, I never cared for the Department of Defense, and I suddenly started caring about that, and partly because of the way they were going about it. This was done completely unilaterally through executive
Mhm.
action. Even though I really wish for the size of government to be much smaller, but I don't want the Congress to become a completely neutered body. And yet, that's what happened. They did it
Mhm,
through executive action. They
mhm,
did it through a guy who was not confirmed through the normal, congressional process. And they caused a lot of disruption. Then, to me, they actually discredited the cause of limited government, right?
mhm.
That to me is a bigger problem. And what you have right now is a very, very weird situation where you have arguably a smaller government because there are fewer departments, federal departments. Some agencies have been cut and completely slashed, and yet it is more expensive. So to me, they have maximized the damage on all ends. So
Yeah.
do have I
So,
redeemed myself here now?
yeah, I mean, they really have slashed just very little. I mean, there's, they've mostly what they've done is just basically fired or let go at great cost some federal employees, right? I want the government to be really small so I can put it in my pocket. And the kind of getting,
At least you did not say
but that's
drown
not
it in
but that's not
stuff.
the way to go about it. It was actually kind of an interesting exercise while they were and you and I have talked about this, like when Doge was announced, like I had this kind of little bit of excitement. I thought, oh my god, maybe they're going to reach out and kind of like, and we're going to tell them how we think about how we should be going about this. And there was really none of that, right? They started like just doing the stuff where they were going after the DEI lines and canceling grants and firing and telling people, well, you can take this package, and firing people. Um, but there was none of the, there's like I in my ideal, like, listen, if I wanted to get to the world that I wanted, I'm not saying that there wouldn't be a lot of chaos and discomfort and anxiety, but at the very least I would like to think that I would be able to express the guiding theory behind what we're doing, right? For instance, like, this is not the role of the federal government. Instead, it is the role of the private sector, or the local and state, or or saying like, this is a government granted privilege for companies, right? Like, there was none of that going on. So you just had the chaos, and you had really the feeling that it was politically targeted. um, and while some of the stuff they were cutting interacted with some of the stuff that would have been on my list for cutting, it was done in such a way that you would have none of the benefit.
Well, the record of populist figures always is that they never cut spending. They
Well, yeah.
always, because that's hard, as you point out, it causes pain,
Mhm.
and you have to make a case for it. It's just so much easier to throw subsidies and money at people and call it a day. And so it's very rare, actually, that spending, goes down under populist
It's
leaders, which
actually
is
very
one
rare that spending goes down, but
goes down at all. But well, it usually goes up
yeah.
many-fold more under populist leaders because there's a cheap way to buy votes, which is another reason why I never could understand why the free market side was even the least bit enamored of him. But you know, the other problem which we've touched on, but I want you to elaborate, is that he used executive. He's been, you know, hyperactive in using executive authority. I mean, he has passed over 200 executive orders already, which is the most of any president in this century. I think FDR passed more than he did, but in this century at least, he's really up there.
Mhm.
And if he can do what he's doing to the budget through executive orders, what does he embolden for future Democratic presidents?
My fear of his presidency is not just through the budget. It's like through literally everything he does. It's like
Yeah,
he's opened doors that people did not open before, and
yeah,
they've been done. It's my understanding about why they're doing it is that they felt that the Democrats were already doing it, and so we might as well do it too. But actually, what they've done is, yes, emulate some of what the Democrats were doing, but pushing it to a place where the Democrats didn't actually ever dreamed of going. And my fear across the board, like, whether it comes to the use of emergency powers, like the use of executive orders, the 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 use of let's do it and let's the court stop us. I mean, it just across the board. It really worries me. Like, it worries me at millions of level. But if we're just talking about the cause of smaller government and free markets, like, it worries me a great deal, because that's not a good sign.
Um, well, moving into the slightly positive mode, I mean, there, as you said, people, free market advocates can tell themselves a story about the good he has done. So, talk to me about some of the more positive things that have come out of this administration on economics that, we actually haven't spent a whole lot of time covering because we are just so alarmed by all the other things that he does.
So some of these things obviously just not my area of expertise. So I'm just kind of like basically reporting what I've read from other people. There is somewhat of a consensus that some of what he's doing on AI is actually really good and important. Same for like the agenda of energy abundance, which is important. The permitting, the the just freeing energy supplies. Um, Now, I mean, the way some of it is done is very Trump-like, where some of the stuff is some of the stuff is good, where it's like all form of energies are welcome, and then the other stuff is like, yeah, but we hate wind, so we're gonna go after that. Um, it is kind of it's free. It's basically liberated, like even the crypto industry. Like, let's not talk about the stuff we like, the family stuff, but for now, like, just talk, like, it is clear that the SEC is like putting actually rules, clarifying rules around crypto, it seems, that are going to be important to for the future of the technology. So along these lines, there's just been, a lot of things that for what will be a really important source of growth in the future. And it's just kind of, and I think that's pretty clear. Um, that's basically kind of like, I think it's I mean, and there I think there are some efforts to kind of rule out waste and abuse in Medicare. They and in Medicare and also in healthcare. So I mean, we'll see, right? We'll see, but they are clearly things. That's not what most people talk about, because that's not the stuff he talks about. That's like done really kind of in the background.
Yeah, I mean, and he may have deregulated the energy sector, but then here we are with almost what, $5 a gallon in gas prices because his populist instincts are manifesting themselves in Iran right
Well,
now.
I don't like, I think actually, see, here's the thing. This is the reason why we're not going to know for a long time, right, whether any of these very positive effort pay off. It's because the stuff that they're trying to do that is good, I mean, from my perspective, seems good. There's always an odor of cronyism and favoritism. There's always, it's kind of like, you are the companies that I pick above all to do stuff of that stuff. But I assume we're going to talk about this later. But that stuff is really hard to do. To do well, it takes time. The really the kind of the important deregulation or permitting, allowing having better permitting processes. To do it well, it takes time. Are they going to be able to finish the job and to really do it and deliver on this agenda? It's I don't know. I just don't know. And it's always been kind of my concern with him, is like the good stuff that he wants to do. They're hard, take a long time. They require Congress too, a lot of that stuff, and he just doesn't want to go through Congress. Meanwhile, all the really bad stuff he wants to do, he can do it very easily. And this is
Right.
why, actually, I think this is why this is what we see all the time and nonstop. I mean, and there's also the fact that he likes to put himself at the middle of the news at all times. So this is why it's never ending.
So, no, that's a really good point. I mean, to take actually what he's doing on AI, right? I mean, I've read a few pieces. You sent me a few pieces, which sounded pretty positive. One thing that he's doing is setting up a national AI policy so that you don't have 50 states with 50 standards that company a
Mhm.
hodgepodge of regulation that then AI companies have to negotiate. And I think America is the world leader when it comes to AI, partly because it's got a somewhat more rational regulatory regime than in European
And he's really
countries.
doing it in a way very different than the Biden administration was going the
Yes,
European way with a very precautionary principle.
principles,
Let's
right,
like, and that was going to be bad. We don't know
right.
whether he's going to deliver on the good, but we know for a fact that the Democrats would do it would do it the European
In
way
a
and
bad
not the.
but then on the other hand, here is where his authoritarianism comes in.
Mhm.
Anthropic says that
Mhm.
it won't it has some problems with some provisions in the contract when it comes to surveillance, and he declares them a national
Yeah, no,
security
yeah,
threat. He tries to destroy the company
yeah, yeah.
completely. He threatens to what the Defense Production Act to basically commandeer the company
Yeah.
at the same time as he's declaring them a national security risk, right? So and that goes to what you were saying earlier, which is that he Democrats do industrial policy. They've got like a sense of, we want to build these industries and we are going to use government subsidies and other incentives to to build that. Trump has taken that, and again, this goes to your point as to the kinds of power levers of power he's making available. Trump has gone so much further. He used the CHIPS Act to give, which is an act that, as I understand it, is meant to subsidize our semiconductor production, right? Because
Uh-huh.
apparently we were losing the supremacy to Taiwan, manufacturing supremacy to Taiwan. And so he uses the CHIP Act to give Intel large sums of subsidies. And then in exchange, he does something that no president has ever done, at least not in non emergency times, which is he demands an equity share in the
Hmm.
company.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and by the way,
essentially,
he's done
essentially,
this. He's done.
essentially partially
Yeah.
nationalizing the
Yeah.
company, right?
So the
And
CHIPS
so
Act.
he's doing,
Yeah.
in my view, what he's doing is not industrial policy, but sort of company policy. He goes company by company. And if he likes a company, he will give it money and try to commandeer it. Or he will try and destroy the company, as he tried to do with
I
Anthropic.
think and it's state capitalism. I think it's like the best. The thing that's interesting, right? So you take the CHIPS Act. CHIPS Act is like all sorts of subsidies and through the form of credits and loans and all sorts of grants. And Intel was getting an enormous amount of money, $8.9 billion. He doesn't seem to be bothered by what usually bothers free market free market people like me, which is like basically you pick winners and losers by giving subsidies to some, and often, very often, extending subsidies to companies that were already in the process of doing what you are now giving them subsidies for, right? he
Right.
doesn't That doesn't bother him. He's kind of like, if you're going to get $8.9 billion from the government, I better get something out
Yeah.
of it, and I'm taking a share. Like the Democrats like Biden would have never dared going this.
Yeah.
Like, who was calling for this? It was
Bernie
Bernie
Sanders.
Sanders and
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren. This like that branch of the Democratic Party. And he's like, great, that's what we're doing. He's
Yeah.
like, and then he's also doing, and I think so. So he's done that with Intel, taking, so again they say, it's not a voting share, but he's the government is still like the majority shareholder. But there he's also he's taken shares in, I think, 14 or 15 other companies.
Yeah.
And he has also effectively just nationalized the steel, part of the steel industry. Like,
Steel.
so if you think about when Nippon Steel wanted to buy U.S. Steel, the Biden administration very stupidly said no, right? Well, Trump comes and says no, but in addition, just says, here's what I'm going to do for your troubles, and basically takes a golden share in U.S. Steel. Things that honestly, I am sure many Democrats would have loved to do, would have never even dared doing, and he just goes ahead and do it. And it sets a precedent. He's just basically picking, like in mining, for instance, like with the issue of rare earth, we have a real regulatory problem with rare earth. But what does he do? I mean, like the way they're going about addressing this problem is taking shares in the Department of Defense, taking shares of some mining companies, clearly giving them a leg up over other mining companies, setting floor prices. He's setting a stockpile, which is going to benefit to some companies. It's very, very obscure. Who knows? Who knows what are the companies that are going to be benefiting?
I mean, right. And that's kind of what my concern, so he may have deregulated the AI industry, or pursued
A framework,
relative,
like a framework.
relatively rational regulations. At the same time,
Yeah.
he's interfering and literally nationalizing, major industries and companies. So, what is to stop the next Democratic president from coming and undoing whatever good he's doing on AI, using the exact same means of executive power and subsidies and and nationalization and takeover that he's engaging in?
No, I mean nothing.
So, it's interesting because he came in as a right wing populist, right? I mean, he's and but if you and Orban came in as a right wing populist. But if you examine the kinds of politics that policies that right wing populists engage in, they are actually indistinguishable from those of left wing
On
populists
economic issues.
on economic issues, on whether it is Hugo Chavez or Nicolas Maduro. They all end up in the same place, which is well, they want to court consumers. So the other thing that you can tell us more about is the sort of Elizabeth Warren type moves that he's making, capping interest rates on credit cards, buying mortgage base, telling Fannie Mae and Mac to buy mortgage securities to lower interest rates. Orban did all of those things, and as did Maduro, and as did Hugo Chavez, right? So at some point, the horseshoe really does converge.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean it is really this is why kind of like I was thinking about this before. Like I always have a really hard time when people say, who do you think is worse and would be worse? And obviously we don't know, like, what Miss Harris would have done had she been president. I assume it would have been, from my perspective, like, again, I don't pretend, like, that I said, from my perspective on economic issues, it would not have been things that I liked. And when I think of him, there's just basically all the stuff that I hate, or stuff where it would have been quite similar, just more like than what she would have done, just on steroid. But even the good stuff, right? Even the thing that is like, that you can say is objectively, from a free market perspective, good. Sometimes it's done the wrong way because it's done through executive orders, so it can be reversed. But in the end, also economic growth is not, and economic growth and freeing the market is not the only thing, right? We care about institutions. We care about, and on that perspective, it's like you can't help but looking at the damage that is done, and it is really, it's it To me,
Well, actually, let's talk about the institutional damage. This is another thing that all populists have in common. They want to control executive agencies, everything that's under their control. They want to control it absolutely. They don't believe in internal checks and balances. They don't believe in watchdogs. I mean, one of the first things that Trump did when he came was fire all the inspector generals that are supposed to keep an eye on public corruption and waste, fraud, and abuse actually in
and
agencies.
by the way, the Vault project, the rare earth project, um, is one of those things where they created this, gave a $10 billion, or want to give a direct loan from the Export Import Bank, the largest in its history, and it has no inspector general.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Um, so but on, I mean, the what he has done on when it comes to federal economic agencies, whether it's the Federal Reserve or the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the kind of interference in their independent functioning that he has been engaging in. And, all presidents are unhappy, for instance, with the Federal Reserve chair. They want certain monetary policies, but then we have an independent Federal Reserve for a reason. We don't want it to get politicized because precisely because the benefits it can give are short term, but then the damage that happens from them is long term and not on a president's watch. So every president has been unhappy with the Federal Reserve. I mean, I remember George H.W. Bush actually said Alan Greenspan was responsible for his second term loss because he wouldn't lower interest rates. And yet they kind of like whispered about that behind the scenes, complained and, whined about it. Nobody has done, not only openly berated a sitting Federal Reserve chair, but actually opened an investigation into him based on completely trumped up baseless charges, right? So how do markets function properly when they cannot depend on an impartial and stable rule of law, which is based on some sound, rational economic principles as opposed to the whim of one president?
Well, I mean, like markets like stability, they like certainty. They like if they're uncertain, it leads to a lot of paralysis. So it's not good. Um, and I mean, and it is. I mean, it's just we can't overstate actually kind of how it's incredible what he's done with the Federal Reserve. I mean, I temper the fact like that the Federal Reserve is politically independent entirely. I mean, it is created. I mean, it was created by Congress, and the Fed chair it is appointed by the president, and he has to appear before Congress. So it's not entirely, but traditionally, what it means is that like it doesn't take its orders from the president, and certainly not when the president is bullying like the Fed chair in lowering rates. Like it's kind of like we talk about fiscal dominance and fiscal policy. Makes the Fed subservient to the fiscal need. This is like kind of like the casebook with like the guy who's like literally saying lower interest rates for
Yes.
no other reason that I want interest payment on the debt to go down. It's
Yeah.
like it's like you're like I think you like I mean, but again, that's what he does, right? He's in your face, like then launching that investigation. Do you remember when he got a tour of the Fed with Chairman Powell, and then he was like he was railing, and then you had Powell that was next to him, like embarrassed and kind of like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm in this situation. It's kind of crazy, and it is not good. It's not good for market. But chaos is actually like it's a feature with him. It's not a bug, right? It's like he actually thrives. He wants to be in the middle of all the news. If there's a little bit of calm, he's going to say something really outrageous in order to kind of get attention on himself. But look at the way he's done tariff policy. Tariff policies, I mean, it's not as if the tariff policy is not bad enough. The policy itself is bad, but the way he's implemented it has been the most insane, erratic, damaging. economically, precisely because you can't count
Actually, yeah,
on anything.
that was my next question for you, was actually on trade policy, and precisely how he has gone about conducting it. I mean, every president has come and had issues with China, right? And China is a bad actor on the world stage. It is a bit of a rogue regime. It violates intellectual property rights. It coerces transfers of technology from companies. So there are some real problems over there. But the problem that Trump was dealing with China was the trade deficit. I mean, he declared an economic emergency based on, the deficit that the US runs with various countries and the world. Deficits, the whole argument that exports are good and imports are bad, was debunked, as you know better than me, by Adam Smith in
Yeah.
1776. So we are seeing like this resurgence of some really retrograde economic thinking over here when it comes to trade. But the bigger problem, as you said, is that what he has done is he's imposed these blanket tariffs on the world using his emergency powers, and then given them selective reprieves to various countries and to various industries.
The tariff stuff is like, I think is like a small it's the perfect illustration of pretty much everything that is wrong with Trumponomics. Basically, it's like first the rationale for the intervention is insane, right? Do you remember Liberation Day tariffs? The calculation that went into what each country, it's literally like crazy. The idea that actual economists put that together is just plain insane. There's like the rational is just it's like crazy. It's like, like a 5 year old with crayon said, this is how we're going to do it. I mean, it's insane, right? I mean, in the market, if you don't remember, like, right, there's a lot of, we just had the 1 year anniversary of Liberation Day, and there's a lot of defender of Trump saying, oh, the economists were wrong. We certainly haven't had the economic impact that they predicted were going to happen, and that's actually nonsense, because the reason why the some of the prediction about what Liberation Day tariffs were going to have, the impact didn't happen, is because actually we are not living under a regime of Liberation Day tariffs, because when he put them on, we had like the market just like went nuts, right? I mean, like there was one theory that was floating around of those who were pushing him to do tariff, is that it was going to be to reduce interest rates because there would be a flight to safety, which is to treasuries, right? And that didn't happen because people had to patch their portfolio, and they were selling their treasuries. So it was like, it was catastrophic, basically.
Mhm.
So then I think Kevin Hassett and Scott Bessent managed to actually get him in a room without Peter Navarro, and got him to actually remove the worst of the Liberation Day tariff. And so, but it was just kind of, it's so random, bad economics, completely like demented, lots of tariffs on our friends for bad reason, like with argument, like you're screwing us, you've been abusing us, you've been like all of this stuff. Then he removes them. He wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, and he just says, you're going to get a tariff. You said there's an ad in Canada he doesn't like, like using President Reagan, and it says, here you go, tariffs on Canada. He's removing them. It's like he's doing literally the world order on trade. He's actually has relied on a rule that applies to all of those you have trade agreements with. So you actually, if you put a tariff on something, you have to put it on everyone. On everyone, it can't just be, he just like basically just trashed all this. He was using emergency powers that he did not have, that he didn't know he had, but it was again another case of his, well, I'm going to do it, let's try to see if they stop me. And then the Supreme Court says you can't do this, and he says, you know what, I'm going to do something else. It encapsulates literally everything, everything that is wrong with the president's approach to economics and to dealing with people and dealing with our friends, dealing with our enemy. And by the way, while in the first term, you can say that he was actually kind of thinking about how to deal with China. Can we really say this in the second term when he actually allows export by of chips by Nvidia to China in exchange for a kickback?
I mean, I grew up in socialist India, which was like the king of protectionism. I mean, we had this import substitution approach, which kept the country, known as the economic basket case of the world for like 5 decades after independence. But now, India has formed a free trade deal with Europe. And Mercosur countries have as well, and Canada is now integrating itself into what it calls these kind of like mid-tier powers. And ultimately, either the US, I mean, I think that's where the reform currents are going to come from. The US is going to start losing out to the world on trade, lose markets, to other countries, and will either have to clean up its act or just face lower economic growth. And I think that's kind of the way it's going to be. But either way, it's not going to be the champion of free trade as it has been. That I think is just gone permanently now, or for a very long time.
Yeah, it's just like, but instead he literally went and just kind of basically bullied and belittled all of our trading partners as if they were worse than China and Russia and anyone else. And it
Right.
just like, and now he's, by the way, it seems that he's also paying a price because now he's concerned that they're not coming to his help with the war in Iran.
Yeah. Right. Well, okay, so we are coming close to an hour over here. So let me ask you the toughest question so far. So, he's, as we were talking, he's sort of blown up the rules based trading order. He has politicized the Federal Reserve. He has replaced impartial regulatory enforcement with his personal discretion, which is common to populist authoritarians. He has done enormous institutional damage that makes markets less functional because they rely on a stable, neutral, impartial rule of law. But here's the question. I mean, what has been striking is that the economy hasn't done poorly under him, and it's possible he has made some structural changes to it in terms of AI, good AI regulation and energy deregulation, and all of that. But for those of us who approach markets from an ethical standpoint, I mean, we are free market not just for instrumental value, instrumental reasons, because they produce prosperity for all, although they do. That's a big reason to be pro market. But they are a species of human freedom. They are an arena in which people engage in voluntary exchange, and they produce what they want to, and they trade what they want to, and they are not trying to fulfill a broader social collectivist goal or live by the edicts of an authoritarian. But if Trump's formula of this draconian statism on trade and immigration, I mean, immigration to me is partly an economic issue. It goes to the free flow of labor across borders. Um, so if this combination of draconian statism and trade combined with deregulation in other areas leads to actually positive net economic growth, is that an advance for free markets and what you and I believe in, or is it not? And if it is not, how will we sell the case for free trade and more open immigration policies to the world?
Yeah.
What do we do?
I mean, I think this is actually the real damage for us, right? I mean, there's the objective damage that's done to the country, but to the reform cause, to the free market cause, is like it's a real damage. Like the way Doge went about cutting spending is just like we've talked about this. It's like it just makes the job much harder for us to say no, 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 no. There's actually a good case to be made. Who's going to listen to us? But I think you said something which is really, really important. It's like market is not merely instrumentally valuable because they produce prosperity, though they do. I mean, they're a form of human freedom, you said, and it is true. I mean, the arena where people engage in voluntary exchange based on their own goals, free from coercion and free from the discretion of whomever appears to hold power, is like one of the things that we value. And we are in a regime where basically we're the most kind of permission slip type of regime that there is, where if you're a company or an industry that this administration likes, good things happen. Like, so he has a lot of tech people, you're saying, like the market is doing well, but even when you actually really look at the source of growth, it's all in very, very uh, narrow areas, right? It's very, very narrow. And by the way, by its own goals, the administration is falling. Like, manufacturing is doing worse than it was. Those tariffs are not helping. Manufacturing jobs are going down. On like investments. There's just a lot of frozen investments in these areas. But of course, on net, because there's this enormous inflow, and by the way, enormous tariff exemption for all things electronic and computers in order to serve AI. Yeah, I mean, this is all growing. But can you say that ultimately, like, we're doing better on net? I don't know. I think that if this administration down the road is going to be seen as having done anything positively, is going to be if it manages to actually set some frameworks for very important things, like again, energy abundance and an AI framework and things like this. But it's like, right now you can't say, oh my God, the economy is doing so well. It is not.
I think, what we'll have to do is, and primarily by we, I mean you'll have to do, is, argue based on the opportunity cost of what we are losing over here. We may, how much more our growth might have been, how much more prosperous we might have been, how much more freer we might have been had he not engaged in this selective deregulation one side and overregulation and draconian controls of the other side. And it's always a hard case to make because, it's like the old seen and the unseen problem. The economic growth that's happening now, people can see what is missing, what doesn't happen, what doesn't materialize because of our, what you called his demented policies. People can't see. So to make that visible to people
Well,
somehow,
yeah. So,
either.
like, I mean, a lot of us are trying to actually kind of make the case that basically is he set goals for manufacturing and what tariffs would achieve, and show that actually it has done the opposite, and certainly has not delivered on the goal. Like, the goal of affordability, it's just this, like, he's failed on this, and he's doubled down with the war, right? Obviously, but even before this, right, it wasn't looking good because tariffs are an engine of raising prices. I mean, they're just they especially rising prices in manufacturing, because most of what we import are inputs that we use in production. So, and so we make all of this case. I think kind of the case that that we have to also make is, like, what is lost when effectively the government becomes really entangled with with the with the private sector. There's just, like, cronyism in the form of subsidies and loan guarantees and regulatory privilege and things like this is bad enough. I mean, I hate it. I've been fighting against it my whole life, but this is kind of next level. I mean, the compact that exists between government and the private sector changes entirely. And you guys ran a piece a while ago, I can't remember the name of the author, which shows that actually, kind of, when you have a populist like this, and especially one that does the kind of state capitalism, you have an artificial boost at, yeah, you have an artificial but boost at the beginning, but it never lasts. And unfortunately, when you have that entanglement that has happened, right, the cost of that, or even the politically feasibility of actually extracting and just separating the two, is even harder. And this is kind of, the government is propped up a lot of companies, it's given a lot of tax credits for this and that and subsidies for this and that. And I assume many of your viewers think they're good. I think they're not. They're not. But this is a step above and beyond, and it's not a good look. It's not going to be a good outcome, and it changes something fundamental about the nature of America, and that is there's no boom in the stock market that can compensate for that, in my opinion.
Okay, on that happy note.
Thank you for listening to Zooming In, a project of the UnPopulist. To get all of the updates from our new series Executive Watch, make sure to subscribe for free at theunpopulist.net. Until next time.